Welcome to the Tuning In podcast, where we talk alignment, intuition, and our internal guidance system. We cover woo-woo topics in an approachable and practical way. I'm your host, Dana Evans of Alignful.com. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tuning In podcast. This is episode 107. And it is the last episode of 2021. I won't be recording one for December 29th or January 5th. So the next episode will be out on the 12th of January, which is really exciting. So everything is turning off for me this week. I am recording this on a Saturday and I'm heading to Buena Vista for a few days with John. Both of us just completed like a big, heavy chunk of a couple weeks, like an intense chunk. And now I have the next 2 weeks where I'm just settling. I have my workshop on Sunday, which when you listen to this on the 22nd, it will have ended. And we'll just say it was a wonderful workshop, the Release and Return to Self Full Moon Workshop. But that, and then I have a cacao ceremony on Sunday the 19th as well after my workshop that I'm participating in. And those kind of are like the completion of this really big cycle for me the past, well, really all of December has been unexpectedly, honestly, a big month of release. And this tonight, the 18th of December, is the full moon in Gemini. And I don't know much about astrology, but I do read about it. And apparently this full moon is this letting go, this completion of a cycle that started in June. I think it was like June 17th, they said. So I'm feeling it. I wonder if you have felt any of that, like things kind of coming to a head, coming to a close, the need to let go, the need to rearrange. This is apparently like a Venus retrograde thing. The need to rearrange, restructure, reevaluate. And I just kind of learned about the planetary things this past week, but it's very much been what my experience has been this month. So I found that to be really interesting. And I'm really curious if you reflect on the past week, if you've noticed any of that coming up in your life. So I'll tell you where to start. I titled this episode Lessons Learned from Cleaning Out My Garage again, because so I like to run a pretty tight ship in my house. I like to keep things pretty clean. I like to keep things pretty organized. And every probably few months, I get the hit to do some organizing. And once a year, usually, sometimes twice a year, that ends up in the garage. And that's like my Achilles heel. The garage is the space that, it just gets messy. Like we don't have a good storage system in there. It's what's called a tandem garage. So it's like 2 cars deep. So it's long and narrow, which makes it kind of hard to clean out because like when I sweep it, like you have to sweep from the very back and like bring everything all the way up to the front. We don't have access to a hose at our condo. So like we can't like hose the garage out. It's a whole thing. And it really is just this place that causes me trouble at our house. And I don't have a great solution yet for it. But here's what happened. I had a pickup come on Friday, the 17th, from this company that I'll talk about to pick up stuff from my garage and take it away in a responsible way, I promise. And it was such a huge shift and relief for me to be able to do this. And it really felt like this big, important completion of, drumroll please, the last 2 years. Because when the garage started getting filled was interestingly in 2020. Okay, I'm looking at my calendar. I'm like, rewind. So February of 2020, I actually got this nudge to turn our guest room, which we don't have very many guests very often, and I was working from home, and I wanted to turn the guest room into, it was like a guest room slash office, and I wanted to turn it into an office slash guest room. So to shift the primary focus of it. And so that was like my birthday gift to myself, was to do this. So I cleaned everything out of there, took a bunch of stuff downstairs to the garage, got a couple new things, hired some painters to paint everything white, got some plants in there, and just, it was so beautiful. It made me so happy. It was my space. So that happened. And then another thing happened around that time is my parents moved and they got a new couch. And so I wanted to get rid of my old couch and get their couch. So I think that happened like early March. So the guest room slash office, office slash guest room happened at the end of February. And then March is when I took my old couch down to the garage and brought in the new couch from my parents. Okay. Well, then that's when like all the, shit happened. Let's say that, toward the end of March. And so I had really been doing these like house projects in February, March. Like I had just gotten this nudge that I needed to settle my space, which is interesting, right? When you look at your intuition and following the nudges, energetically, it seems as though I was being guided to prepare my home. So it was a beautiful space when we were, whatever, locked down. So I, revamped the living room. Like I got a new rug, we got the new couch, I got lighting. So just like some little things that I was doing in the office. And then all the stuff that I didn't need went to the garage because it's like, well, I'll sell that. I will sell that stuff. That's what the story I told myself. Well, then March happened. And of course, we are on lockdown. And it's not like I was selling things on Facebook Marketplace and like having random strangers come to my house to pick things up. So that like wasn't allowed. So it kind of just stayed there. And then April and May and then June, July, it's like, what the heck? I don't know. June, July, whatever. And then September, October, November, December, it's like you kind of went into lockdown again. And then we hit 2021 and I'm like, oh my God, I got to get rid of this couch. The couch was taking up so much space in the garage. I'm just telling you a story. There's a lesson at the end of it, so bear with me. So somehow I'm in December of, actually it was November of this year, where I'm like, I got a ticket for my car parked in my neighborhood because they only want one car to not be parked. They want one car to be in your garage at least, and especially if you're not driving it. So I got a ticket and they said they were going to tow my car if I didn't move it. And I was like, oh my God. But my car couldn't fit in the garage because the garage had the couch and all this crap in it that needed to be gotten rid of. So that was like the catalyst in November. I'm like, that's it. I'm selling this couch. Like, this couch. So then, I think this was, I don't know, beginning of November. One day, this is just random, we're home and Mia comes bolting upstairs. She had chased a mouse. She had garage access. She was allowed to play in there. She had chased a mouse into our house from the garage, and we ended up having to catch him. And I put the seat heater on. It was a cold morning. I put him in my car in the box. I didn't want him to get cold. And I took him out like into a field far away so that he could be free. So I'm like, that was weird. Why do we have a mouse? So it was like the ticket and then the mouse. And I'm like, this is like not okay. I'm so done with having a messy garage. I can't see things like mice that are in there. I can't park my car in there. Like, this is it. So I put my darn couch on Facebook Marketplace. And I got so many people responding, but no one bought for like weeks. Maybe this was in October. I'm not good with timelines, but maybe it was October that all of that happened. And then finally, someone's like, I want to buy the couch. I'm like, yes. And so he was going to come like on a Saturday morning. So I went downstairs like Friday afternoon, and he was coming the next morning. And I went to like vacuum, like we had it covered with blankets. So like it didn't get too dirty. So I took the blankets off and vacuuming it. And then I go to the other side and I start vacuuming. I'm like, that's weird. I see like little black spots. I'm like, I lift up the cushion and I'm like, no. This is where the mouse had been living, in our couch cushion. He had a really nice nest. I mean, it was like all sorts of whatever they cushioning, all sorts of mouse poop and all sorts of pee. And I'm like, mother trucker, I can't sell this couch. So I messaged the guy. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I cannot sell you this couch. There was a mouse living in it. And I just like, I can't explain how devastated I was because this couch so needed to get out of my house. Like it represented so much heaviness. Like it represented 2020 and just I'm like this couch needs to get out of my house. It is blocking me energetically is what I was starting to feel like. And it was this representation of other things that weren't moving. And so then I'm like, okay, I'm just going to hire someone to take it to the dump. And then my conscience took over and I got so stressed. I cannot tell you how this happened, but I got so overwhelmed about responsibly disposing of the couch. Like I became kind of obsessed with it. And it was like this big internal conflict because I wanted to get rid of the couch, but I also didn't want to, I don't know. It was this whole conflict. And then I started thinking, I'm like, well, if I'm going to like have someone come pick it up, like maybe I can have them take other stuff in my garage. And plus I had all this clothing that had been sitting there for a while that I needed to get rid of from earlier in the year. I had another chair. We had an old treadmill. Like, listen, this garage was a freaking mess because we also got a treadmill last year, 2020, because come October, John's like, I'm not going to be able to run outside anymore. And the gyms were closed or you had to wear a mask, which he wasn't going to do while he's running. And so we got a treadmill because the other treadmill couldn't even go fast enough for him. And so now we have this old treadmill. I mean, it was horrible. This garage got so horrible over the last 2 years. And so I'm like, well, maybe they can take other stuff as well. So I start looking and I find this one company and they just take everything to the dump. And I'm like, okay, so I'll hire this company and they'll come take this stuff to the dump. And then maybe I can drive these things to Goodwill. And then maybe I can find like a local charity that works with homelessness or, women trying to get into the workforce or homeless teens. And maybe I can take clothes there and maybe some of these things and maybe the kitchen things can go to like a family that needs. So all of a sudden I go from wanting to clean something, get the couch out of the garage to like a massive project that is going to take so much energy and time from me. And I will remind you, this might not mean anything to you, but I am a projector and I do not need to be adding more things for me to do that I don't have the energy to do. And what happened is like all of a sudden I got so overwhelmed. I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I don't have time for this. I don't have the energy for this. There's so many things I have to figure out now. I have to do all this research. Like, and then it's just what happens? Shut down. And so I did one more Google search. And I think I did like couch recycling Denver. And had this company popped up that said gone for good. And I was like, ooh, this feels like something. Gone for good. Good. So I click on it and I start reading about it and I freaked out with excitement because this company, one, they're a thrift store. So what they do, they will come, you pay them. I paid them a decent chunk of money. Let me just say this was not the cheapest option, but it was, for me, it felt like the most conscious, right option. So they will come and you pay for like truck size. So I did like a quarter of a truck. And they will take everything. They work with homeless shelters. They're their own thrift store. So anything that they can keep and resell, they will. They also work with the housing authority, the Denver Housing Authority, where people who are coming out of homelessness, getting like their first home, they'll get a voucher they can go spend at this thrift store. They're also in a neighborhood that has a lot of homelessness. And the guy told me, like, I like interviewed him. I had so many questions. And he told me that the homeless population around there just knows to come there because if they have extra stuff or things that, they're not going to sell, they'll just like leave it out for them to have. And they work with like quite a few different specific charities as well. And they work with a company called Souls for Souls. This is another thing I've had drama around. We have a lot of shoes that are not like something that you can still use, and I don't want to throw them away. And I know at Nike, you can take your old shoes and they recycle the rubber and like they reuse them. So I have literally a full trash bag of old shoes. You know, John goes through running shoes quite a bit. So like a lot of running shoes, a lot of my old shoes. And I like that was another thing, like another stop, another task and separate errand that I would have to do. That's also been sitting there for 2 years. So they work with Souls for Souls. So like you can take your shoes, they give those, and that company does all sorts of donation and recycling and reusing of shoes. Anything that needs to go to the dump that is unsalvageable, they will take to the dump or a recycling center. For example, my mattress that was in there, that was also in there since February because there was a full queen size bed in the office that I took down. Well, first it lived in our upstairs of our house, like just leaning against the wall for almost a year. And then I moved it into the garage and it's been there for almost a year. And Mia like climbs up it and like sleeps on it. So they do responsible recycling of mattresses, or if they can be like cleaned and refurbished, they'll do that. They also take cords and electronics and batteries. Okay, another thing I have a full bag of cords. Listen, I don't know if you guys know any of this, okay? You're not supposed to throw these things out. You probably know this, but it causes so much drama. So like I have all these old cords, like old stuff, and then bags of batteries that I just didn't, I'm like, I have to take these to a battery recycling center. I think if you're listening to me, like maybe you're getting to understand like why my garage hadn't been cleaned out. Like it built up so much, and in direct correlation to my garage building up, so did my like environmental consciousness about it all, which created this like really challenging situation where I didn't feel like I could get rid of this stuff without like a significant amount of energy and effort and research. And I couldn't just take it to Goodwill. Also, like Goodwill, I was like, I don't want to take it to Goodwill. Like, we have a Goodwill right by our house, but it's like, I want it to go somewhere where it's actually going to be utilized and used and not even necessarily sold. Like, it felt really important that stuff go to an actual cause that is making a difference directly in people's lives. And so I learned all about this company. I talked to them on the phone and I'm like, great. When can you come? They're like, we can come Wednesday. I'm like, great. Well, Wednesday rolled around and I was like, nope, I am not ready. So I had to reschedule from the 7th to the 17th. And the interesting thing is that this garage has been on my mental list for a long time, obviously. And I kept saying to myself, I know at some point I'm going to feel the natural energy to do it. That's always how it works with me. I have, like, when it comes to deep cleaning and organizing, like big projects like that, I only do them when I have the natural nudge. When my inner voice guides me to do a project like that, I do it because then I have the energy and the time and I can do the project. If I try to plan a project like that, like, oh, this week I'm going to do this, like it just doesn't work. So what I found with this garage project was like things came to a head in November. Then I did the research, found the company, and that like in December, which is, I kind of had the month off. I have this month off mostly from like active coaching. So I have a lot more space. So it's like that kind of worked because my schedule's honestly been kind of full this year. So that like happened. And then I pushed it back and they couldn't just push it back a couple days. They had to push it back a whole week, which opened up so much more space, right, to do this. So then last weekend, I think it was, I don't remember what day, but I just woke up. I'm like, I have it. The energy's here. The desire's here. I'm organizing. But I started with my house. So I'm like, well, since the pickup's coming, since I paid for a quarter of a truck, I can just go through my whole house again and not just the garage. So I started again with my clothing. Interestingly, I'm in this membership called the Vortex. And this month, the content was all about personal style and like home vibes and look and feel. And it talked about clearing out and releasing things from your home using, we found 4 words that were like our words. And those are like the filter of everything that you keep or leave. It's like Marie Kondo, but with these 4 words. And my 4 words ended up being beautiful, magical, powerful, and rooted. So I started going through things and I went through all my clothes again. And I discovered all these stories of like what I'm keeping, why I'm holding on to my clothes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this relates to my money stories. So like all of a sudden these money stories were coming up. Went through my clothes. Then I went through all the drawers that were unorganized and like released and cleaned and organized every drawer in the house, actually. Then cupboards. And it was so effortless. And then I went into my bathroom and cleaned out. Oh my God, my bathroom was a really big project and cleaned out all that stuff. And I was like, this is amazing. And then I think this past week, it was Monday. I was tired because of all the things I'd done on Sunday. And then Tuesday, I had the energy again. I was like, I guess I'm going to the garage. And I went down there and like I started doing things and then I got tired. I'm like, crap, I don't have any energy. Well, that's fine. So I went upstairs, watched a movie and like chilled out. And then I got a new surge of energy and I went back down there. And when I do stuff like this, it is amazing when I do it with like the natural nudge and surge of energy because I'm unstoppable. I can sort. I'm actually very good at like turning chaos into order. It's something I've been very good at, especially in like the physical form. I'm very, very skilled at that. And so I did it. And I sorted things into piles and I like moved all the things that we're getting rid of toward the front of the garage, all the things we're keeping toward the back. And it felt so freaking good. And then Friday morning, then it was like a real spiral few days and it was crazy. I had more stories coming up and this is what I find. Here's what I'm distilling this down to. I think it's great if you like to plan projects like this and tell yourself when you're doing them. And if you have the patience, if you're willing to trust these projects and you know like generally what needs to get done, like at some point I need to organize this, at some point I need to clean out my garage, and you give yourself the space for them to happen organically, for life to bring it into your awareness, as it were, for me, right? It was like October, November really led into what happened in December. It is so much more than about organizing your space because your space is your energy. And so what has happened this week in particular, like last week also, so the week of the 6th, but also the week of the 13th, is in this cleaning out, in this upheaval, in this pulling everything out and looking at it and touching it and filtering it, releasing it or keeping it. So too were my own emotions, my own stories, my own wounds pulled out, laid out on the floor so I could see them and decide what to release, transmute, or keep. And it was honestly kind of painful couple of weeks. Like I was slapped in the face. And interestingly, by happenstance too, I had a lot of like energetic appointments scheduled. I had a Tibetan cranial and reflexology appointment. I had a coaching call, I had acupuncture scheduled. I had a group coaching call with my School of Love group. And then this weekend I have the cacao ceremony. So like that kind of all like happened to be around the same time. So it was like all this energy was coming up, all of these old stories that were like shocking to me. I'm like, how could I have not have seen this pattern that I've had for years playing out again? Like one day I was hit with so much awareness that I was like sick. I was dizzy. I was nauseous. I was shaking. Like it was so intense to see my stuff so clearly for the first time in certain areas. And a belief that I have is that whenever I feel the natural urge and nudge and have the energy to do these deeper projects in the house, it's almost a way for the mind to like focus on something so that my body can do its own stuff internally. Because the mind sometimes gets in the way of that, right? It's overthinking, it's blah, 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 right? It's talking to you. So when you give the mind a good project, like sorting through toiletries, all of my organic, natural skincare products, it allows for these other pieces to start to bubble up, to be processed internally, and then to come out, the ones that need to be seen and felt and heard and reevaluated. I've decided that I see whenever I have this urge to organize as it's a precursor to some big shifts that are going to be happening in my life. And that has kind of rang true for quite some time. It's like, I can't plan it. And if I do it from planning, it doesn't have the same effect as if I just let it come organically. It like opens the channels for so much to shift and change. And then to find out that this, we have Venus in retrograde, which is apparently all about reevaluating, right? Restructuring, reassessing, and that has to do with relationships and money, right? In your business, like that's been coming up, just questioning like how I coach and what my business means and what I'm here to offer and what's beyond my coaching, like what else is coming through. And relationships, right? Relationships with clients, relationships with John, relationships with family and friends, like all of these things are coming up as I'm cleaning out the garage, right? Restructuring within the garage, right? Reassessing, releasing. This is a time of the full moon. The full moon is all about release and letting go, like what is no longer serving you. And it's all coming at the end of December, at the end of this big 2-year cycle of 2020, right? These COVID times. And it's asking us to really face and integrate the past couple of years. And in particular, in this timeline, this full moon, the past 6 months since June. And so it's so cool. Like if you zoom out and look at what's happening micro level in your life, what might be causing even pain or frustration, like my couch, what's actually then happening at the macro level. Because to zoom out and look at the bigger picture of like why and how things have come to a head right now, it makes perfect sense. This was how it was meant to happen. So after the pickup, I had like a full morning yesterday on Friday. It was like I had coaching call, like some big conversations, just some in-depth personal exploration. Then the pickup, they took everything. And then I came back and I sat down and I was like, exhale. My whole body, like, I was suddenly aware of where I'd been holding my traps. I hadn't been eating much. Like, I hadn't been hungry is the main reason. Like, there was just so much holding that I wasn't even totally aware of. Like, it was all this buildup of the last 2 weeks, right? Of the last 2 years, but really this in the last 6 months, the last 2 weeks, like all these time periods. And I was like, whew. And then John had the most intense 2 weeks and they like submitted their project to the client and he was like, oh. And all of a sudden I cleaned up the house. I put the lights on our tree. I put on the fire. I lit some candles. I got a freaking bottle of champagne. I only drank like a third of it, and I sat down and just felt more tears. I'd been crying a lot this past week, like a lot of releasing, a lot of cord cutting meditations, just a lot of sitting and being with myself. Like that's part of the work, right? Is like being present with yourself. In fact, that's what the whole release and return to self workshop is about. But when your life when it feels like things are in upheaval, it's an invitation to ground down and to come back to yourself. And I was very proud of myself actually for being so present during all the things that were unfolding. And so when I really sat down on Friday evening and just felt it for the minute. I felt like these tears of relief. My body just let go. I had taken, like, I call it a full service shower, like exfoliation and like washed my hair and just all the things. And that moment, I was like, wow, it's always worth it. It feels so painful while you're in the pain and the discomfort and the upheaval. And this, it was like my own inner world was restructuring. And also, when those pieces, that haven't quite fit, when they finally click into place and you return to self in this new way, without all the garbage, without the mouse couch, there's just this sense of peace. And we can't force that. We can't force this timeline. I felt like a new person last night. And then I went to bed at like 7:45, was asleep by 8. I slept solid until 5:15. And I woke up this morning and I was like, wow, I feel like a different person. Like, and that brings tears to my eyes. Like, I feel some massive shifts have happened. And I don't even know what that means. And I don't know what that will bring. But what I do know is that I couldn't have carried that freaking couch and all that that couch was representative of, right? All of these stories, all these old patterns that I wasn't aware of until this month. I couldn't have carried all of that baggage into 2022 and still received what I'm desiring for 2022. Like, they're an energetic mismatch. So I had to go through the pain and the shedding this month and the integration. And that's another thing I've heard, like astrology wise, is this month in particular is one of integrating the lessons from the past 6 months. And for me, I kept, like, really in the past like 2 to 4 weeks, I have had more repeat lessons from the year than ever. Like, I just kept getting hit with the same thing over and over and over again. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, okay, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it. Let's integrate. Let's integrate. Let's integrate. And I had spoken to a client once to God within her, and she was going through something really challenging. And I said, God, why did she have to go through it this way? Because the mind would have just wanted to have the result, but not through this painful experience. Like, the mind could see a way to have the result without the painful experience. Like, why did she have to go through it? Why did it have to be this way, God, and not the way the mind wanted? And God said, your ways aren't my ways. So simple. Like, that's such a, that, of course, that's what it said. And again, you can add in, God, source, universe, inner voice, but that's her languaging. And I mean, that's what came through, is because your ways, the ways of the human mind, are not my ways being the ways of the divine consciousness of the bigger picture of the universe. And so, for example, there were some things I said earlier this, like a few months ago. I was like, I want to learn about attachment theory. Well, how I ended up learning is directly through a relationship where we were different attachment styles, and it like caused some friction. And I'm like, there you go, right? My mind was like, I want to read and learn and understand attachment theory. And what I received from life was, cool, here's a really intense, possibly challenging situation that is also related to attachment theory. So you can work through it and learn it that way. And that's circling back to this idea of all this intensity that I felt over the past few weeks. It's the pathway for me to have the things I'm desiring. And I don't even know what or how that means, but I do trust that there is a why, a bigger why. Because while my mind may not have chosen this experience, I do trust enough that I know that it's important to go through it. Because if I desire the things I desire, the pathway to them, I know this is the pathway to them. And so I'm willing to sit with the discomfort, the uncomfortable conversations, the pain, the nausea, the upheaval of my life in a lot of ways, like the franticness that I was experiencing, the tears, right? I'm willing to go through that to come out on the other side. It kind of feels like a water slide, like at Waterworld or something, where you go into the tube, like the dark tube, and it's like terrifying. And you're like, ah, you're screaming the whole way. It's like spiraling and spinning, and you don't know how far you've gone, right? You don't know how much longer it's going to be. All you see is darkness, and it's like kind of exhilarating and terrifying. And then all of a sudden you're like popped out on the other end, and you're like, oh my God, I made it. And you like have like the manic laugh because you're also releasing like the tension of that. That's kind of what this is. And I mean, that's why people are in the workshop, the Release and Return to Self workshop, because of this is the experience. And we have to be able to really release as things are coming up versus holding them back and letting them build up, because that's not working with the energy that you're being guided toward. At least I don't feel it is, right? When I resist, when I fight it, when I complain about it, when I am like, something's wrong, this shouldn't be happening, then I'm fighting the flow. And when I surrender into the flow, as uncomfortable and challenging and painful as it is, it does actually allow things to move faster and easier, even in the hardness. And I'm forever grateful for the people that I have to turn to, coaches and friends and family. My cat, she's been so tired this week because she's been so busy helping clean up John and my energy and helping process it. She is freaking exhausted. And I'm just grateful for that, like energetic and actual physical and personal support that I have. And I think that's invaluable for all of us to be able to lean on, as well as leaning on ourselves, right? Leaning on your inner voice, leaning on your inner guidance, and writing to that, talking to that space as well. So that is the story of the mouse couch and how it brought me to this place of absolute peace and clarity and gratitude for the pain of what's been going on. Whew. So now, divinely timed, John and I are going to our favorite mountain town for a few days. And then I'm going to see some family for the holidays. And then I'm just going to probably do some more organizing on smaller levels within the house. Maybe order some new clothing to match my words, my magical, beautiful, powerful, rooted words, because I actually honestly have very little clothing right now because all of it was so old and it had holes and it just doesn't represent me and who I'm stepping into. And I was holding on to it just like I was holding on to the couch, and it was no longer serving me energetically, physically at all. And so that's another lesson in there, right? Of what are you holding on to that used to serve you, but no longer is? And what would it look like to start to loosen the grip on that and let it start to slip away and be gifted to someone else, either energetically or physically, so that it can bring them joy and release you of whatever burden it was possibly carrying, the weight, the dead weight. So with that, thank you as always for listening. I think I've shared this many times, but this podcast is one of my favorite outlets to connect and share and express. I'm very much a verbal processor, and I do just hope that it continues to bring you value and that you can sense into and feel, learn and live through my lessons, and also look back into your own and say, okay, where can I reflect this back onto my life? What am I holding on to? What am I ready to let go of? What am I being called, or where am I being called into my home or my physical space to clean out, to rearrange, right? To reassess in my relationships, in my home, in my closet, in my words and thoughts, in the questions that I ask myself. And then a great one to end with is there one thing that has become a heavy energetic weight for me? And if so, right, assess that. For me, it was that couch, which was the catalyst to all of this, by the way. If so, what can I do about it now? What can I do to shift that? Either shift my view of it, shift my experience of it, or literally shift it into a new environment so that it can be the catalyst to so many other shifts that it might be representing that need to happen or want to happen within my life. Just asking that question will likely, you don't necessarily even have to answer from your mind. It will become clear. Let me tell you, it will become clear just by asking that question. And then it's up to you to choose to follow the information, follow the nudges, follow the guidance, and see what it brings you. So with that, I wish you happy holidays, a happy new year, welcoming 2022 with abundance and delight and a lightness from all of the shedding from the past year or two, and really sitting in the intentionality of who you are becoming, and let that start to bubble up, because who you are becoming likely doesn't carry the same weights, the same physical and energetic burdens that you're carrying now. So by releasing them, you get to really emerge and shine as your new self. So I'm so grateful for all of you. Thank you so much, as always, for listening, and I will see you next year on the Tuning In podcast. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Tuning In podcast. As always, if this would resonate with anyone you know, please share the episode. You can follow along with my journey on Instagram at Dana_Evans, or find me on my website at alignful.com.